very bad news for Japan. Many people were asking themselves, why was the tsunami in 2011 that followed after the megathrust earthquake, the Tohoku earthquake, so intensely devastating and huge? And they've been looking for the clue. And it was not only the earthquake itself, guys, there is something else hidden. And now they found it, and it is bad news for Japan, but not only for Japan. If we look at the Pacific Ring of Fire, because now with this, we might be able to predict where huge shizi might hit the fizzy. And for us that are living on the west coast of Canada and in the US, this could be groundbreaking. I always have to say that word, but it's literally like scary to say that. So the reason why the 2011 tsunami was so devastating is hiding, or I have to say past tense, was hiding in a layer of mud, and now they have uncovered it. It's not a supervolcano, it's not a secret weapon, it's not some unknown megafault. I can tell you that already. Scientists have conducted a record-breaking drilling into the seafloor, into the ocean floor, and they found something that is honestly very, very upsetting news for Japan, because what they discovered means that the 2011 disaster wasn't just a freak accident. It may be built into the geology itself. So let me explain. We all know 2011, Fukushima, the massive tsunami. Japan was hit by one of the most powerful earthquakes ever recorded. But that is, of course, the trigger for a tsunami. But wherever you are in the geology, tsunamis can be different. We've seen it with the recent megathrust earthquake in Kamchatka. It did trigger a tsunami that was also reaching us on the west coast. Crescent City in California got something, but not nearly as bad as what happened in Japan. So the Tohoku earthquake, that is what triggered that tsunami that devastated coastal towns, and it led to the Fukushima nuclear disaster. But here's what has confused scientists for many, many years since then. Why was that tsunami so massive? Why was it so tall? Yes, it was a magnitude 9 earthquake, huge. Definitely there's tsunamis coming with that, but something very unusual happened. The fault, so the break in the earth where the plates slipped when that earthquake was created, it ruptured much closer to the surface than experts expected, much closer to the surface. So if you watch my channel more often, you might now think, okay, closer to the surface is never good because it intensifies everything. But also that, guys, wait. But while you wait, can you do me a favor, please? Can you give this video an early like and a hype? Share it with your friends. It helps the channel, doesn't cost you anything. So the surprise, the big surprise was where the rupture took place. Because usually when we're having big mega thrust earthquakes, magnitude 9 plus like this, they rupture deep underground, tens of miles below the surface. But this one behaved very differently. You know, when we have subduction zones, right? One plate is subducting underneath the other plate, and it gets stuck for a while, pressure builds up, and then poof, it happens. But the difference that was happening here in Japan, that made the difference. But how? This is the big mystery. The scientists didn't understand it for quite a while. Why was it so terrifying? They asked themselves the question, why did the rupture travel so shallow? Why did it reach the way up to the ocean floor? How? Because subducting plates, that is deeper down. Because here's something very important that we need to understand in order to understand the big picture. If an earthquake happens deep underground, yes, it may shake violently, but if the movement reaches the seafloor and lifts it upwards, you're not just shaking the water, you're displacing the water. You're physically pushing the ocean up, the whole ocean. And that, of course, creates a tsunami. So the key question during that research, became, what allowed the fault to slip so easily all the way from deep down towards the surface? How was that possible? And it was a record-breaking expedition. We have to say that, because to solve this question, scientists didn't just guess. They went directly to the source. Now you might ask, well, how can you go directly to the source with subducting plates? An international research team boarded a drilling ship, the Japanese drilling ship with the name Chikyu, and they drilled into the Pacific seafloor, right there where the oceanic plate dives beneath Japan, right at that spot where it's diving below, where it can get stuck and then release these earthquakes. This is the subduction zone, right? They drilled into the subduction zone. Think of this like a giant slab of earth that is slowly sliding underneath each other. And that's where the earthquake happened. And this drilling operation, as you might have expected, wasn't small. It's not that you take a small drill and drill a tiny hole. You have to go down. It was record-breaking. That's why I said that. And it's even recognized by the Guinness Book of Records. They drilled deeper than any scientific ocean drilling before, than ever before. They have collected, and that's amazing, actual core samples from the fault zone. And you know, imagine this, what this could tell you. I have spent a lot of time in my life doing sample drillings and looking at these cores, but looking at the subduction zone that produces mega thrust earthquakes, this is amazing, absolutely amazing. They were literally pulling up pieces of the earthquake zone itself. And we know these drill cores, these layers, they're like a book written about the past and about the geology. And of course you ask now, well, what did they find? Tell us. I'm telling you, what they found is the part that changes everything. They discovered a band of something called pelagic clay. We've talked about clay quite a bit in the recent weeks. When you remember that tragedy of Neshemi, a whole mountain is coming down in a rotational landslide and is bringing a whole town down the cliff. I'll put the video in the end screen. If you haven't seen it, it's mind-blowing, and now the cross has also fallen into the abyss. But let's get back to Japan. So pelagic clay sounds like a fancy word, and let's not be scared just because of that. Pelagic just means deep ocean. So that's not the scary part yet. And clay, well, clay is clay, right? The layer was about 300 feet thick, 100 meters. It's a little bit more than 300 feet actually, 328 feet. And that's like a 30-story building made entirely of very fine, soft sediment. Now you might already understand what I'm hinting at. This clay has formed slowly over millions of years, like tiny microscopic particles settling gently through the ocean, like layer after layer. And that's what you see in these drilling core samples. And over time, it created a thick band of extremely fine material. And now we're coming to the critical part. It is soft and slippery, very soft and slippery compared to the harder rock that's around it. And this clay layer acts like a natural weak plane. So imagine we have two rough concrete blocks that we're pushing together, really pushing them hard together. And then we're trying to slide them very hard if there's a lot of pressure holding them together. But now imagine you spread some WD-40 between them, some grease, some soft jelly lubricant. It's easier, right? Suddenly they slip easy. And that clay was the grease. So what happened exactly in 2011? During the 2011 earthquake, tectonic forces concentrated along this very layer of clay. So instead of the rupture having to grind through hard rock that would also slow it down, it found this smooth, weak layer that created a pathway. And it slipped. Boom, right? And it kept slipping all the way up, all the way up. That movement has reached the seafloor. The ocean floor was lifted by 40 to 60 meters. So we're talking 200 to 300 feet. Imagine that. That's between 131 and 200 feet. If you lift the ocean floor, I always say the bathtub effect. If you're sitting in the bathtub with your legs underwater and you suddenly lift up your legs, what happens to the bathtub? You create a huge tsunami and you might spill the water. So now imagine the ground beneath the ocean is rising at the height of a 15-story building. Boof! At once. Very, very fast. Not over a small area, over a huge area, over a vast area, just in seconds. Now picture what happens to the water above it. It has nowhere to go but outwards, spilling over the edges of your bathtub. It's a vertical displacement in shallow water. That is a direct, catastrophic tsunami generator. So, like the bathtub, your bathtub here is the Pacific Ocean. And Japan was on the edges where it spilled over. Now you might ask, okay, why is this bad news for Japan? This is a very uncomfortable part, I have to tell you. This behavior there is different from many other large earthquakes. I'll give you an example. We've had the Nisqually earthquake in 2001 in the Pacific Northwest. It started more than 50 kilometers below the surface, like 37 miles. It was quite deep. Deep earthquakes can be destructive, but they don't usually lift the seafloor in this extreme way. But in Japan it did because of that clay layer. So that means that the tsunami was so devastating wasn't just random. It was geological. It was basically set to happen. And that raises a serious concern, absolutely serious concern. So if a similar pelagic clay layer exists in other parts of the Japan Trench, we've got a huge subduction zone there. Or, and here it comes what scares me a little bit, or in other subduction zones around the world. I mean, we've been told, or we are being told on the West Coast, if the Cascadia subduction zone earthquake, megathrust earthquake happens, 100 feet tsunami, or even higher, the seafloor, everything also on land, it will be lifted up and then fall down again because of that earthquake. But what is the seafloor made of? That will be very, very interesting. But the problem is these subduction zones are very, very long. So geology can change. But this really raises the question, and that's the scary question. Shallow mega ruptures may be more possible than previously thought, not only for Japan, all over the world. That changes risk calculations for everyone that's sitting, especially along the Pacific Ring of Fire, that horseshoe formed subduction zone area that encloses the Pacific Ocean. Subduction zones exist all over the world, not only in Japan. Pacific Northwest, Chile, Indonesia, Alaska. So if scientists identify similar weak clay layers in those regions, then they can better anticipate where shallow tsunami generating ruptures are possible, right? This research matters so much. Sometimes the most catastrophic forces on Earth, they are controlled by something as simple as a 320 feet thick layer of ancient ocean mud. Ocean mud, that's what it is. Sediments that were settling down on the seafloor. So the conclusion is the 2011 tsunami wasn't just about the magnitude of the earthquake itself. It was about the mechanics that were involved. And that's what we need to keep in the back of our heads when we look at other risk zones. It was about where the earth slipped. And thanks to this record-breaking drilling into the seafloor there, we now know that deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, there is a naturally built-in weakness. Is it everywhere? Doesn't seem so. The recent Kamchatka megathrust earthquake last year, 8.8, the geology wasn't right. It didn't create such a devastating tsunamis. But in Japan, that earthquake hit that slippery layer like a hidden fault guide. And that's why this discovery is called very bad news, because if the earth decides to move again, especially in this area, the path may already be waiting. The result we might already know. I hope you found that interesting, but check out the other videos here in the end screen if you want to support the channel. Links are in the description. Thank you for everyone who became a member. Support the channel with a membership and you get behind the scene videos about my private life, exclusive for channel members. Thank you for all my members. You are absolutely awesome. Thank you for the coffees and thank you for your supers, guys. Be safe, be prepared. Knowledge is power. I see you in the next one. Bye-bye.